husband to God rather than the male. Additionally, why can't we apply our current societal norms to interpret the Bible since females are starting to be the breadwinners and have successful careers like men? Why can't we interpret the Bible through the lens of the female leading the family?
Yeah, my concern on this question is actually the last part of the question. Why can't we interpret the Bible through the lens of interpret the Bible through the lens, the cultural lens, basically. Because I think the issue here is like, if we interpret the Bible by our culture, then the Bible can never speak to the culture. And so the Bible ends up just being twisted into whatever we want it to be. And so, and actually, if we look at church history, one of the things that's really cool about Christianity is there have been some unique ways that Christianity has stepped into certain cultures and practices that, you know, that we would find really bad, like burning widows, you know, after the husband dies, or things like that. That like the Bible spoke, when Christianity came, it spoke to that culture, and practices were changed. You know, but it can't. If you come into that culture and you say, well, let's read the Bible in terms of our cultural lens, it's like, well, how can we justify what we're doing based on what the current culture does? And so it ends up being this culture that speaks to the Bible rather than the Bible speaking to the culture. So I think that's the part of the question. I think that even starts to raise the question, because then if we go back and we say, well, okay, well, what does Scripture clearly teach on this issue? Then we start to take Scripture and we say, oh, it seems like this is how God calls the marriage relationship to work. And then I would add to it, just to start to, some other people can address further, but just to start to address this issue is, just in meeting with guys on campus, I cannot tell you how many guys that I've met with have been drugged to church by their grandma or by their mom. And Christianity, a lot of times Christianity to them can be a woman's thing. You know, and it becomes irrelevant to guys if that's been true of. Now, not always, and sometimes it doesn't work like that. And so you just start to see how, like, when we start to twist, you know, or things, obviously sometimes there's just brokenness or reasons why that took place, and that's okay. And that can be a good thing. It's better for a mom to lead spiritually than nobody to lead spiritually. But yeah, it can just start to twist the way that we perceive Christianity, or ways that other people perceive Christianity. So I don't know, other people want to address that?
Yeah, I think when I read this question, like, I was just really curious of, like, I guess, like, the background of, I'm not calling the person out that, like, asked the question. I think a lot of people probably get this question. But I'm, like, curious as to, like, the person's experience, like, growing up. Like, I think, what I mean is, like, did they grow up in a household where their dad was totally not respectful, was, like, even abusive, or there's no way you could see your dad as, like, a spiritual leader? Or did you grow up in a family where your mom was a spiritual leader and she did a great job of that because someone needed to step up with it? Or are you in a relationship with a guy that's not a believer and you are just not wanting to let that go? Like, I kind of just wonder what's behind the question. So I would just be curious, because I think our experiences play into, like, what we're thinking about what Scripture says. And I think the reality is, and Nick hit on this, is that God did design, He has, like, His original design was that a husband would be the head of the wife. And so just to clarify, it's not saying that men are like the head of women. It's saying that husbands are the head of the wife. And so a couple scripture passages would be in Genesis 2 and 3. And kind of what we see is that God has given Adam authority over everything. And part of a way to exercise his authority is that he gets to, like, name all the beasts of the field, the birds of the air, everything. And he even names Eve, woman. And in Genesis chapter 3, he gives Eve her name, Eve. So that's exercising it's just kind of showing that he has this headship over his wife. And then in Ephesians 5, it says, husbands are the head of their wives as Christ is the head of the church. And so that's God's design. Like, that makes sense. It's just that there are different roles. Men and women, husbands and wives are equal. They just have different roles.
And I would just, to tie all that together, marriage is not fundamentally about our relationship. Marriage is more fundamentally about the picture of the gospel. Paul says in Ephesians 5 that the profound mystery of marriage refers to Christ and the church. In other words, that marriage is given to us by God to reflect the beauty of God's love for his people to a watching world. And so as we live out our roles within marriage, we have calling related to those roles that align with the role of Jesus and the role of the church. And so the counsel in Ephesians 5 is, wives, submit to your husbands as the church submits to Christ. And then husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. Right? And so like Kinsey's role in our marriage is to defer leadership to me. And that doesn't mean that she does what I say or that I boss her around. But it means that when there's a tie, when we each have one vote and there's a tie, I have the tie-breaking vote in the decision. But my role of loving Kinsey as Christ loved the church and giving myself for her means that the way I use that vote, I'll be held accountable by God for my use of that tie-breaking vote. And I have to use it in a way that serves Kinsey as best as I can. And so in no way does this demean the wife or lower the wife. In fact, it elevates her and puts the husband in a position of serving his wife in that way, of leading, of loving, of caring, of protecting, of nurturing.
It's like Christ laid down his life for the church. You know, it's
like Jesus
the point
died
of
for the
that.
church.
You know, laying down your life.
And I just, one more thing to add there. If you were to look at that Ephesians 5 passage, you'll have a little break that says husbands and wives. But the verse right before that says submitting to each other out of reverence for Christ. It's a mutual submission, you guys. It's not saying, oh, little wifey, you need to submit. It's not saying that. So I just want you guys to hear that. And I also, Jamie and I haven't been married that long, not even 2 years. But in the 2 years that we have been married, there's not been a time where it's like Jamie's like dragging me and like making these decisions, and I'm just like flailing my arms, like so upset that he made the decision. You know what I mean? It's like because we're talking about things. But at the same time, I would not be in Evanston, Illinois, working with Athletes in Action if I wasn't married to Jamie. You know what I mean? So it's like kind of this cool thing to see how God like continues to write your story as you are living in this mutual submission to each other for Christ.
If you truly love someone, is it wrong to have sex with your partner if you are in a serious, committed relationship, even if you haven't married yet? If you're with someone and you know you love them, it's still wrong to have sex.
I had a scripture for this, which basically says the answer is yes. It's 1 Thessalonians 4:3-5. It says, "This is the will of God, your sanctification, that you should abstain from sexual immorality, that each of you should know how to possess his own vessel in sanctification and honor, not in passion of lust, like the Gentiles who do not know God." And I mean, the other scriptures that point to